a very big welcome. Winston Hazel, Toddla T, DJ HQ. So this whole Paths Unknown thing, it's 2 weekends of celebrations of music crossing borders happening here and in London. And it's kind of all about something that you guys have been involved with throughout your whole lives in music, about what happens when you hear things you haven't heard before, when you go places you haven't been before, when you meet people you haven't met before. And I wondered if we could just start by each of you telling us a moment where that happened for you in terms of your music. Where are your mics, people?
Right, so good evening, everybody. I'm Winston, in case you didn't know. So for me, it was 1994, going to Jamaica, and hitting the ground running there and hearing this massive sonic explosion, and being able to reference that right back to Steel City, the kind of industrial sound of the Steel City, resonating in the sonic sounds that I was hearing in Jamaica. The thing that hit me immediately was the fact that a lot of the sounds in the bashment that was being played at the time out there sounded right outdoors, without walls, and it kind of resonated with that Sheffield klang sound that we were used to going to bed to from the industrial east of the city, with the drop hammers hammering out the steel at night, 24 hours a day, and it just felt like I'd landed back home again, but far away in a very, very hot place.
So that connection, the sonic connections between places.
Yeah.
One of those things that bring us together. What's the mic situation over there? Are we passing?
Passing microphone check.
Okay,
I think we've only got one.
Mic.
That's all right.
We can do sharing, you can do sharing.
Yes, fine. I guess mine was like a lineage of what Winston just experienced, because Sheffield's quite naturally multicultural, which is an absolute joy. Where I grew up is Park Hill, which is just behind a train station. And there was different types of, backgrounds, communities and races. So, you'd always hear different music over the wall or whatever of the garden. My next door neighbours were Jamaicans and whatever. But when I started going to parties in the city, that's when it really slapped me around the face. And it was Winston and Pipes always DJing, and they would play records that kind of you would expect, and then every now and again they'd just go to Jamaica. And the sonic was just super exciting. But it made sense to the records they played all night, before and after. And I just remember being in raves and just hearing these like Jamaican records. A lot of the time they didn't even play vocal versions, it was all about the production. And that to me was the most exciting bit of the night. And still to me, the palette of what I do today. So it's give thanks to Winston and Pipes and Parrot and other people we'll talk about later that made me kind of fall in love with this sound that was not in my blood at all. So yeah, there you go.
Q.
You right, guys? Yeah, I think my story is slightly different to these two because I'm not from Sheffield, but Sheffield's played a big part in what I do and what I'm about. I started releasing music when I was young, around like 13 years ago. And my first release was getting played in the famous niche club in Sheffield before I'd even gone there. And that was the reason why I ended up going there and just fell in love with the whole vibe. And yeah, that's what brought me to Sheffield, and I've been here for years just doing my thing, man.
Okay, so we need to know like your first niche night. What happens when you rolled up outside? What happens when you make your way through that doorway?
It wasn't anything like I expected, to be honest. A lot of people said their niche is this, niche is that, but I got there and it was just vibes from beginning to end. Music, everything that I loved hearing. All my friends were there, loads of girls. It was just nice, man.
So over the course of the next hour, we're going to be finding out a little bit more about the sort of Sheffields that each of you inhabited, because they're different Sheffields. They're Sheffields that overlap, that feed into each other, but they're discrete, they're different. So maybe, Winston, can you tell us a bit about Sheffield youth clubs?
Sheffield youth clubs, obviously an essential part of growing up in any city, not just in Sheffield, but obviously when you don't have access to music because the airwaves aren't playing it, or mainly because you can't even get to the nightclubs, youth clubs became like a a vital part of your existence as a young person growing up. And what started to happen in the city was you got to find out where the best youth clubs that got to play the best music. So it'd be like Rollinson, Hurlfield, Dobcroft, and all these different places were just basically, you know, some of them have got better kit than others. You were able to take your own music up and play it. Like, so I was at Hurlfield Youth Club. I was playing soul, funk, and disco. And I know that Dobcroft Youth Club, which had a very black following, they were playing lots of jazz funk and jazz up there. And you just you got to know where the best pockets of music were in the city. And then over time, you know, because it was only 2p to get everywhere in Sheffield on bus, I don't know if anybody knew that, but you could go anywhere for 2p, right? And that lasted for a great long time, trust me. And so you could get on bus and you could go and visit some of these places, and then you start to make connections with different people across the city, which is really empowering as a young person, because you realise it's not just you and a couple of your mates, there's lots of other people, and you start to kind of gel together. And so like the youth club culture, I think, for me, was one of the reasons that I knew that I could find something other than what I was expected to do when I left school. So it was, for me, I was looking at music. I didn't know how I'd be able to make that into a career in any way, shape or form. But as time went on, no matter what I tried, I always ended up back in music. And then I think the youth club culture was probably pivotal in that choice for me from quite an early experience.
So you've got like a load of music with you. Can you just give us a little spin through some youth club sounds?
Okay, so Youthie days were me trying to play, was me playing my music, funk music, to a predominantly white audience at Hurlfield Youth Club on Manor, right? And when they say, what they're playing tonight, when I say I'm playing funk, and they'd say, don't they mean punk? So that's what we were up against, basically. And this isn't particularly one of the tracks I was playing at that time, but I'm not, when I say funk, I'm not talking about the Jackson Sisters and James Brown and that kind of whole Ray Groove feel. It was a much blacker sound than that. It was very sonically improved due to the equipment that was used to produce it. And this is a good example of that kind of sound. So that Mr. Groove One Way was, for me, is like an iconic tune, because it epitomises what I loved about funk, and it was the P-funk element, a punkified, funky element. So it was sporadic, it was random. You would kind of hear stuff that you wouldn't, you'd hear that for the first time in the early 80s and think to yourself, music can't get any better, because you can hear how superior that recording is. And then, sort of because I wasn't a DJ at that time, we just liked to collect music, but I ended up just playing it to my mates. We played the music so we could go out to dance at the youth clubs, essentially. So we were all dancers. And it was all about footworking, if it's jazz fusion kind of style. And, we kind of went from fast fusion to kind of half-stepping that. So it was kind of almost like freeze moves. I can't explain it, I'd have to show you, but I'm not going to do that. But anyway, so that sound kind of transpired into, it kind of took the conventional instrumentation of jazz funk to another level from America, as far as we're concerned, and it stripped it right back down, lots of space and sonic punctuation, and just great lyrics that were kind of really inspiring. So this is another example anyway. Sorry. So that's obviously kind of taking the whole love theme to a different level and just kind of putting some serious funk in your back when you hear that, But it's essentially, that's kind of the disco groove. And I think the new electronic instrumentation that came around allowed that sound to mutate into something that was other than disco. So for the dancers, that was dance heaven, basically.
So I want to ask you about the dancers, because there's been many times in our kind of music culture where the dancers and the DJs, the dancers and the music makers have worked together to move the music forward. And I want to know about what the relationship in Sheffield was like between the dancers and the music makers. We know Manchester, people like Gerald were dancers And the reason that he made some of the music he made was because of his background, understanding about like feet as much as understanding about beats. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So the dancing element of it came way before all of that. Guy called Gerald and the early house sound of the UK. So in the sort of 1981, 82, 83, 84, the Jazz Funk All Dayer circuit, which was a national scene, would produce these events that would happen on a month or bi-monthly basis in places like Birmingham Powerhouse, Nottingham Rock City, what's now the Aberdale Picture House on Aberdale Road, and various places in London. And there was probably like 7 or 8 really good venues. And what used to happen is, as a dancer, I would organise a coach from Sheffield, 53-seater, really crappy old diesel coach, and just pack it, take Sheffield posse down. Sheffield posse would go with a bag full of clothes with the intention of dancing for 12 hours and about 4 different full changes of clothes in their bag. So the experience of dancers was one that drove, one of the DJs, Jonathan, and another DJ, Colin Curtis, used to go to America and get jazz bands like Airto to cut extended 12-inch players specifically for the UK jazz funk market. And these versions weren't available in the US. They first landed here. They got played, became massive for the jazz fusion guys, and it was coupled with the dancing. Brought the style, the fashion, so you would obviously want to look and feel the part. So people were cutting off bits of clothes so they could feel cool, and ripping jeans and putting zips up here and bleaching one leg, and it was all, every city had its own style. And when you arrived at these venues, there would be like one corner would be the Sheffield corner, and everybody knew that every venue, Sheffield would be in that corner. Birmingham, the Convicts and their dancers, we didn't really have a crew name, but eventually became Smack 19. And every city had its kind of its area and its own style of dancing. And then we used to put those to the test on the dance floor. And it wasn't a way of, we didn't dance to stop fighting. It was just, you just danced. There was no kind of violence in any of this at all. It was, you picked fashion and clothing and dance floor moves against each city. And that's kind of, that kind of sparked an explosion in people in the UK making music for those dancers. And when that scene sort of died off, those people on that scene were coming to our club in Sheffield, Jive Turkey, because we had the only dedicated jazz room in the country that was dedicated to jazz fusion, batakuta, all those kind of styles, which was quite specific, really. So we had quite a large following for a very long time in the city. That filled the gap for all the dancers across the country. Rugby, Nottingham, Birmingham, everywhere.
See, the whole thing about dance, like, if you look at things like Chicago and footwork, you can see that's still alive and well in other places, and it's a really important part of the way our culture developed. But Q, I'm wondering, can you tell us a bit about how dance relates to bassline? Where are the dancers on your scene?
Who knows about the shotgun dance? That was a big dance in like the bassline clubs back in the day. But on a serious note, it's like people went out to dance to this new kind of music that was hitting the cities, and going into the clubs and hearing that music, that's when people got into the sound and thinking like, yeah, I like this music, I want to get into it. Like a lot of the MCs from bassline started off as grime MCs, and because they was going to the clubs that everyone was going to, enjoying the music, they wanted to get onto that music as well. And like same with producers, and then that's how the scene grows and stuff like that.
I'm kind of like jumping forward a little bit here, but I remember when this record dropped, it was super inspiring for me. It's MIA's Galang, and this was produced by Ross Orton, who's a Sheffield producer. Not many people know that. And it was also produced by a guy called Steve Mackey, who was the bass player in Pulp. And when I heard this track, it just sounded like Winnie, Ross, kind of another guy, Parrot, and some woman from London on top that everyone thought was amazing. But really, I haven't got the instrumental, and I'm kind of gutted I didn't bring the instrumental. The instrumental is pure steel. Sheffield never got the props for this record that launched a career for someone super successful. More props, more love to her. But this was made on London Road, opposite a chicken shop, on 2 speakers, Tannoy Reveals, about £100, a desk that was so shit, quote unquote, the only way to use it was to rag everything into red. To the point where I've got all this sophisticated equipment in my studio and I've still got that same desk that I bought from someone in Sheffield to rag into the red. Because I can't get the same sound. And when this came out, it was interesting because I'd heard these records that Winnie was playing and Pipes was playing, and this was mad because it was like, wow, there's more people out there that can understand what we're up to. And at the time, she was like hot girl, do you know what I mean? So it was like everyone wanted a piece of Sheffield Sonic all of a sudden. And the vocal is debatable whether you like it or not, but when it comes to, can you cue up for me, please, Vinny? When it comes to the production on this one, this for me is pure Sheffield.
Tell us about the originators then, because, you know, this is stuff from back then, but this stuff is not over, is it? What is the originators and what is happening tomorrow night?
Okay. So the originators is an idea that when this sort of the kind of the bleep period is what it's known as now, the kind of warp years. There were a series of artists that kind of made tracks for that period. Forgemasters, Unique 3, Nightmares on Wax, LFO, Alternate, were not necessarily alternate in this area, but you know we've shed 1.5 of our outfits, each one of those units, and come together to form what we call the originators, because we just wanted to explore the idea that there may be like another 10 years or something left in the opportunities that this music could give. Because we hear a lot of the new music that's being played by people like Toddla and Q at the minute, and it still resonates with what we were doing back then. So we still feel like we've got a bit of life left in us. We thought we'd come together to create a series of tracks where we'd pass them between each other in the crew, remix them up, and put them out as on Originator record label, Originator Sounds record label, and then probably tour the idea with our own sound system in non-licensed venues. So that's what we thought we'd try and do from next. We've got a few dates for next year, Europe and the UK, and tomorrow night we're doing a really small, intimate place in Sheffield called Music Junkie. It's about 150 capacity, just to test sound system in a small environment, because we're not necessarily going to do big venues. We'll do a lot of small places. But also don't forget this big jam on here tomorrow night as well. So.
Oh yeah, that. So Toddla, do you want to tell us about some of the collaborations you've got going on with Sheffield artists?
Sheffield artists? Boy, well, Coco's here somewhere, isn't he? Yeah. Yeah, we're there. That's the artist from Sheffield. Everyone think we met here, but we didn't. We met in London, which is kind of funny. And he moved down here, and I always rated him. And I was like, I need another Sheffield in studio. So we work. He shares the studio now. Before that, though, it was like the leg ups that I got from local, not really artists. It was more producers and engineers. There's a guy called Chris Morris, who lives 2 doors up from my mum now. He took me into his studio one day. I learned more there than I did a year at Leeds College of Music. No disrespect to the College of Music. Everyone do your education. It's a joy. But the
As
actual...
Aretha Franklin used to put on her record, stay in school.
Exactly, there you go.
Or don't.
And then Ross Orton, who made the Klang record, same thing. He took me to his studio. And everyone really kind of helps out, and it's collaborative, and it's not... You know, there's moments of, you know, competitiveness and... That's for sometimes anonymous, but it's a very much I'll lend you my synth, you borrow my headphones type of place. And those key moments were so like important to me to earn my craft, you know. Robert Gordon, who made those records with Winston, lives on my mum's road, and he used to mix my records and give me tips about sonics. He used to master my records. Everyone was like close and willing to help, and it was such a great place to grow up for that reason.
It would be good to hear from both of you actually about how you see Sheffield music as kind of like adding to grime, what Sheffield music is bringing to grime, and what grime, like the kind of intersections between the different musics that you're involved with. Well,
for me, it's funny because a lot of the old Forgemasters and Robert Gordon productions, like Track With No Name that we have to play today, the melody's like a grime tune to me, and that was, 89? Something like that. And then the bass heavier stuff, and then when Wiley came with Eskimo, like it sounded a bit like Robert in a weird way, and it wasn't that foreign, and that's why we embraced it so much. The darker side of bassline obviously is like the cousin of grime. MC culture on that, you know, we've always had our own version of it. So we don't necessarily give to grime, or take from grime, but I feel like there's a synergy that's unlike rehearsed. And when grime kicked off and Wiley was making beats and Slimzy was on radio, I was like, "Wow, this don't sound that different from what these lot do down the road, even though it's like so different in a way." So I feel like we kind of done it anyway without meaning to, you know.
Yeah, I think in terms of sound, I think Sheffield's got a unique vibe that nowhere else can touch, because like you can get a grime MC but put them on bassline and they'll sound just as sick as they was on grime and stuff like that. And I think a lot of that gets overlooked because Sheffield's not a place where grime comes from, but there's a lot of talented people here that can make noise in grime. Look at the stuff that you did with Coco, and that was ringing bells in London.
Yeah, true stuff.
So it just needs more people like Toddla to just get involved and just show people that, yeah, there actually is loads of sick people here. And
So tell us briefly about you and Flavour D and Royal T.
my two mates, yeah. It's funny, that story actually, because we've been friends for ages. I used to be on One Extra and I used to play their songs, and we just linked up through having a mutual respect of each other. We was in the studio one day, funnily enough it was Red Bull Studios, and we made a track. The first track we've ever made together, and it's called Vibes in Ting. I'll play it a bit now. Yeah, we actually made this song at the end of 2014. And yeah, as I said, we were just in the studio together. We made a track, and then we left it for a few months, and then we thought, you know what, we actually need to put this online to let people know that we've done something together. And rather than put DJ Q and Royal T and Flavour D, we used the letters from each of our names, and we tried every combination. So first it was T, DQ, Q, D, T, and TQD was the one that looked the best. So TQD, I think it was Day and Night we actually put online first, and then Vibes in Ting. And a few booking requests that are coming through. And they were like, yeah, we'll do one booking, fair enough. So we did it, and then from then, more requests that are coming through, and then TQD actually became a thing. I think we did the first show together in 2015 at the end of the year. 2016 we did a few festivals, and then part of the album beginning of this year. And yeah, up until this time now, we've just been doing shows. But
so if you're going to break it down, like who brings what?
I think we all bring a unique vibe, and it all comes together nicely as one. Because Royal T from Southampton, Flavour D's from Bournemouth, I'm from Huddersfield, and we all just bring all our different influences together, and it just makes one big melting pot of vibes, man.
I want to ask you a bit more about klang, you know, bleep or klang, whatever you want to call it. Can you all give me a sense about where this Sheffield klang, this beep is in the music that you represent?
The Sheffield clang, which is, I think, is a term that Pipes coined, wasn't it? The clang. Anyway, it sounds amazing. It's with a K. And it basically comes from that thing where if you speak to any musician in the city, they'll say that you know, their music reflects the kind of industrial heartbeat of the city. And what that means is, if you're too young to remember, again, the drop hammers from the Don Valley, when they used to ricochet 24 hours a day, the sound used to bounce up the Don Valley and bounce off the hills. And so from every hill that you heard it from had a different resonant sound. And some of the kind of, I think there's like a 700-ton press, a drop hammer in Don Valley at one point. When that used to go off, you could feel it in the air when it was warm enough. And it's the kind of thing that, my dad used to work in the steelworks, and a lot of our parents used to work in the steelworks, so they'd bring that smell home. You'd hear the sound at night time, you go to sleep to it, you wake up to it, and it just stayed with you. And even though no one ever tried to replicate that, whenever you went into a studio to make music, it had recognition to that. You're a product of your environment and your music as well, and that's basically what the Sheffield clang repairs, what it refers to.
I mean, by the time I was making music, most of the steel industry was done, but the aesthetic of the factories and warehouses was very much important. My first studio space was £30 a month, And my current studio would probably get me a coffee for that. And where we were opposite was this guy that made like doors and stuff, and it was just noisy. Bang, ding, boom, ing, everywhere, every studio you went to. Even though the steel industry was gone, there was still that feeling of factories and industry. And I can hear it in the music, and I mean, Winnie's probably a better person to talk to about it than me. The dancehall thing and the Jamaican thing at the time bizarrely sounded similar. So to fuse them sounds was normal. And that's when I was going to those raves. That's why the records made sense together.
Do you know what?
What?
That sound in bassline, yeah? I've been searching for a word for that sound for ages, and klang's the best sound. It's like the best description, because it's like almost metal sound. You know that when bassline drops, most of the dubs right now, it's like that metal, what, that kind of vibe, man. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a Sheffield thing, and it translates everywhere, man.
Obviously, we've spoken about Sheffield's, rich history and house and techno, acid and the rest, bassline. But where do you see the future musical direction of it over the next 5 years?
That depends on you guys, really. What do you want to see in the city for the next couple of years?
So back to me.
Yeah, back to you.
It's just in terms of, I guess where you see, what scenes do you see the city, enriching itself in the most? I see at the moment there's a lot of techno going on, but personally, what do you guys see coming out now?
I mean, I've not lived here for years, so this is a bit of an outside perspective, but in terms of like venues and infrastructure, I feel like Chef's healthier than ever. Like, there's the ethos of the warehouse party, and where there's a lot of legitimate ones now which are safer. They're not going to get shut down, and that's a great breeding ground. You have obviously a lot of techno. It's Hopeworks that does a lot of the techno, right? Yeah. So that is become like a sort of hub for that, and it's just nourished. And I think that the youngers than me will probably take this lineage and do their version of it, and that's exciting, man. I can't wait to what happens here. And with the warehouse spaces and the places like that, in theory, you're going to get some super exciting music and very uncompromised in a good way. And that's why I see it from an outside perspective.
From seeing a few cycles happen in the city, my interpretation is that Sheffield currently is in a stabilising period where there's acceptance that all the cultures that have culminated to make the city as much of a focal point is currently, we're accepting it as first of all in the city, because I think for a very long time we've been very good at saying to anybody that come from the outside, saying, "Oh, no, there's no happening here, it's rubbish," But I think we're accepting that now, and we're learning how to exploit our own talents for the first time. So, but I think a lot of stuff that's come before, up until now, have been born out of need and desperation in a lot of ways. So we've been through a lot of tough times nationally and locally. Sheffield's always been the underdog as far as cities are concerned, and it's always kind of struggled to find its own identity and USP. That I think it's found it, but it's not the best person to be able to exploit, the best place to be able to exploit it. So I think we're in a process of learning how to bring what we've got to the rest of the world, so that we can benefit from it as much as the rest of the world, something that we've not learned how to do yet. So I think in terms of what's going to come next is depends on the environment that we end up in. So it's almost like, there's a lot of clubs shutting down and stuff like that at the minute. If people just allow this kind of stuff to happen, then you're left with this kind of sterile environment where there's no breeding ground for creativity. And everybody gets pushed into these really niche little environments where all the artists live there and these people live there. We almost have to kind of create the need ourselves and think outside the box, live outside our comfort zone more often. And it's that what generates a need to create new types of music, because music generates itself from your experience. It's hard to sit down and say, I'm going to do this, and it works out well, unless you're Toddla. He does quite well at that. But, when you start to kind of organise your music in that way, it can stop being a movement. It's your thing, and the movement happens when your environment that you live in forces the music out of the environment that you live in. If that makes any sense. So, yeah.
My question is to Winston. I would love to hear a little bit more about the actual sound systems themselves that you used and played on, and how those have changed. Obviously, the music has changed through the time, but how the systems have changed as well.
Oh gosh, immensely the systems have changed. When we used to do Jive Turkey, we used to use this rock guy called, and his sound system, it wasn't even a sound system, it was called Gabardon PA. And he was a rocker, like, you know, but it's all because we couldn't get enough kit together. The reggae sound systems couldn't really translate a lot of the early electronic music because they were very focused on, like, you know, bringing out certain frequencies in music. And I don't think because a lot of the music, what was coming around, the new electronic music was quite full on the mid-range element. If you took too much away from it, because it wasn't mastered well in the best way, you'd lose some of the important elements of it. So you'd end up having to take out all the really crucial subsonics in order so it would play without feedback. So we ended up using these rock sound systems for Jive Turkey. And it was loud enough, but you know, you're playing in a ballroom, in a classical ballroom, on a sprung dance floor that's made for ballroom dancing, and any bass that went through just ricocheted through, bounced off a wall, and came back through the turntable. So it was dreadful, like, you know. The parties that we did, the house parties, were basically, who's got hi-fi? Oh, I've got some. Bring your speakers down, and we'll string them up. One deck, red light. That was it. So the house parties were. It wasn't really about the quality of the sound. It was about the gathering of the people in a hot and sweaty. So the more hotter and the sweaty the environment, the better the party was, because you could forget about the fact that some of the tracks sounded really, really shit. And then. Fast forward quite a few years to the Cabal years in particular, sound systems have become more sophisticated, or PAs, which are now sound systems, have become more sophisticated, and access to them had become affordable. So in particular, the Cabal experience, the sound system was probably third, or if not half of the experience of the event. And people knew that no matter, you could play anything on there, and you could play Arctic Monkeys, and it would sound so bad you'd be into Arctic Monkeys, even if you hated indie music. And it got to that level, you know. So you could drop music. You could. The music what was getting made in the studios was getting made because they knew the quality of the sound system it was getting played on. And this was at a time when MP3s was massive, and it was difficult to kind of get a good balance in terms of what you're going to be, you know. I was playing MP3s and couldn't understand why you get that really high-pitched frequency that when you played music out loud. It's because it was being squashed down so much that you just got loads of white noise in there. So we kind of went back to basics and stripped it all back. Less is more in terms of sound system, a few plugs, some powerful amps, and you know, and also the right aesthetic. So two sides, one stack, because music basically has stereo. So I think when you see there's two speakers, you hear it and feel it the right way. So all those things play a really important part in terms of a sound system. And we went above and beyond to make sure that that was one of the main kind of threads that ran through the Cabal parties, because we suffered in silence with the fact that we didn't have that during the Jive Turkey period.
Thank you. Any more questions?
This question's directed at Hugh. He just sat there relaxing, so I thought I'd ask a question.
Walk on.
You good, bro? It's been a while. My question relates to bassline, and the heyday in 07, 08, 09, it used to be very family-orientated, like with the guys that made music and DJ'd. It was very family-orientated in the sense of everyone used to go there and it was everyone were boys. Now, with the new producers that are coming through, how do you think the scene's going to evolve?
In all honesty, it's two separate scenes. It's like, obviously, the scene now is influenced from back then, but this is a different thing now. And I think that's something that people don't realize. It's like a new set of listeners, a new set of producers, a new set of DJs. And I think people that was into it back in the day, coming to it now, I'm thinking that, yeah, it's all the same and stuff when it's different. I think it's hard for people to get their heads around that. But it's like, how many years now? It's like 2009 to 2007. Like 8, 9 years now, isn't it? So a lot's changed. A lot has changed, man. But now I think the sound's more widely accepted on a country level and like European level, even like down to America and places like China and stuff. So it can only get better, I reckon. At the moment, we've got guys like AC Slater and Sinden out there pushing the night bass stuff, and they're getting a pretty big following out there at the big festivals and stuff. And night bass has an event that runs once a month in LA. That is actually sick. You're out there and you forget you're in America because the vibe is like a UK vibe. Everyone's on it. Everyone knows about rewinds and stuff like that. The producers have got all the fresh dubs from all the UK producers. And they're releasing music like monthly from UK producers and worldwide producers as well, just all pushing towards that one bassline sound.
Just so you don't get left out, Toddla, question for you. Back in the day, I used to work in an office with your mum.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Ross, pick up yourself.
And,
Mad. Oh, I don't know what's coming next, though.
Exactly. And she used to roll in on a Monday morning, and this is when you were at King Ted's. Yeah. And I really distinctly remember her coming in one, and she was just exasperated. That boy. And he says, he wants to be a DJ. What sort of a job is a DJ? And she just was chuntering about it all day, you know, like, bloody hell. What's she saying now?
Way. Boy, that is incredible. I didn't see that one coming. I've only brought my dad down, actually, but I knew he'd cause a madness, so I didn't. I mean, obviously I didn't know that side of it, because they backed me so much, I thought that they were like, oh, yeah, go for it. But, yeah. Shit, we've got some conversations to have when I get home. Now, big up Mum and Dad, because honestly, they were so cool. I remember actually her saying to me one day something like, when's this going to actually pay off? Do you know what I mean? I'm spending £30 a month on this studio. And then the next week, a tune came out, and it was on MTV Bass, and then she got it. And ever since then, well, she was cool before that. That was the start of her understanding it. But
I guess you were only about 14, 15 when she was cracking on about this.
Yeah, that's incredible.
You were jumping ship to go clubbing with Winnie.
Yeah, blame him.
Wow, my thing's totally different to Toddla's. Basically, my dad's Ghanaian, African, and my mum's Jamaican. So, like, being black, it's like university, school, everything. Why do you want to do music for? There's nothing in music. So I was doing music. I remember I left uni after 1 year to just pick up the music thing full time, and I got kicked out. And it was mad because they knew how passionate I was about music, but at the same time, music was just this thing that I used to do in my spare time, and it wasn't serious to them. I think the first time they actually realized that the music thing was serious was when one of their friends came up and said, oh, my daughter just went to a club that someone was playing at, and then when someone else realized it and they knew someone else saw me as like a professional, that's when they kind of like just embraced it, and it's all right now. She tells all the work friends that I'm a DJ, so it's all good.
But wasn't your cousin or something you had a cousin who did Bleep, innit? Was it L Double or something?
Yeah, L Double. He used to work with Unique 3, like in the end of their stuff. I think after like Rhythm Takes Control and that, and then he started DJing and producing drum and bass. He owned Flex Records, and yeah, that for me was like a big influence because my mum used to listen to reggae and stuff. Then he had all the samplers and the synths and stuff. I used to go to his house, and it was like, this guy's actually doing something different, and it's more interested in seeing my dad playing CDs of songs that I only think, oh, okay, this guy's playing some sick songs. But at the same time, I couldn't tell him that, yeah, what you're doing is, I'm really excited about it. I just had to pretend that he would just, it's all right, yeah. You know what it's like, innit?
Hiya. Oh my god, my voice. Yeah, this one's for Toddla. So like, really congratulations on Foreign Lion.
Thank you.
Really good album. I just wanted to talk about how you got to know Andrea Martin, because she's
Oh,
got
yeah.
a real her voice. Is
Yeah.
just-
So Andrea Martin is a woman that vocaled my latest album, for those that don't know anyway. I went to New York to do a DJ gig, and I had a day off the day after, and then I flew home the day after. And because I was so obsessed with rap music growing up, I used to listen to SCR, which was on a pirate radio station in Sheffield. Where did it broadcast from? Was it Norfolk Park? Yeah. And there was like a rap show on that. I used to listen to Westwood. And so like my first love before I discovered like what Winnie was showing me, and that was hip hop. So when I went to New York, I was like, right, day off, gonna work with a rapper. Sick, New York. No one gave a shit. So I was like, right, fuck, I need to work with someone. I booked a studio. And Switch, who's a producer, and a friend of mine was like, I've got this lady called Andrea Martin. Yeah, Switch had a song with her called I Still Love You. And I was like, but I've got loads of singers back home, whatever. I went studio, and it was weird. It was like some spirit came in with her, and I was like, this woman's incredible. And she got in the booth, and the way she writes the songs is bizarre, because a lot of people hear the song, and they pen it, or they do voice notes. She can't hear it before she goes in the booth. So every time I was making tracks, she'd go outside so she couldn't hear it. She'd be like, is it ready yet? And I'd be like, yeah. And then she'd come in, put the headphones on, play the track, and she'd write it there and then. Like a rapper or a dancehall artist would do. Like the melodies. No, she played the tune, and then the booth, it just come out. I was like, how do you even know the key? Like, something a drum pattern. And then she just patterned loads of demos, and I was just like, this is incredible. I want this lady to vocal my record. And then we did the rest by the net. And yeah, it's been an absolute joy working with her. She's amazing. Yeah, that was that.
Yeah, man. This one's for Toddla. Basically, when did you see your career start to take a turn, like in Sheffield or when you moved from Sheffield?
It was in Sheffield. It was funny because I was so obsessed with being a DJ, as my man knows from telling my mum from 14. I was working at the same time. I was working shops and supermarkets and whatnot. And I wanted it so bad. And then the day it actually happened, I kind of panicked because everything was set up so perfect here. I had a £30 studio. I had the security of my mum and dad here. I could get advice and watch these guys DJs. And all of a sudden it's like, right, go and DJ in Barcelona or whatever. And I was like, shit. Like, there's only 25 of us here that like the music we do. Why do they want it in wherever? And it was right weird because I've been building up for it for years. And then I was just like, I was super kind of, I suppose you could say, inconfident about it. And then I was hustling and it was happening. And then the only reason I actually moved to London was because my partner was there and I was coming back on the train just to get clean pants.
Okay.
And it was like, fuck this, I've got to move down there now. But there was that moment of like, probably like 2008 where I was like, I can't physically work in a shop, see my friends, see my parents, go to these raves and do music. So I just cut. And yeah, I'm so blessed. Like, again, it's all from this lineage we're talking about right now. And I still try and carry that everywhere I go. Like, sometimes when I'm panicking and no one's DJing, I think, what would Winnie do? Or what would Pipes do? Like, it's weird. I can't get it out my blood. So yeah, again, give thanks to the Winstons and the Pipeses and the Parrots and everyone before me, because I think what we talked about today, we've just touched the sides of something so unexplored and so brilliant. And yeah, it's just a joy. So big up Red Bull as well for letting us like share it a bit, because it's kind of an untapped story and history. It's mad.
This is Winston, or my dad. A lot of the time, I hear a lot of people coming to me and saying, like, telling me about Park Hill back in the day, like house parties at your mum's. Can you tell us about that?
Hyde Park. Yeah,
Park Hill,
okay.
Hyde Park.
Hyde Park Flats, well renowned in the city, cities in the sky. You know, a bit of a. I think at the time they became I think it was a listed building for one of the most iconic structures, high-rise structures in the world. I think in terms of its design. But anyway, it was a very close community, and. To be quite honest, I don't even really know how it happened. It's one of those things that just exists. It just happened, and my mum was all right with it. My dad worked in the steelworks. He didn't really have that much to say about anything in terms of what I was or I wasn't doing. He did what he did for the family, and then left the rest to my mum to kind of sort out. So she was quite happy to just say, just not push me in one direction or the other, but just if I came and told her I was going to be a DJ or I was going to be working in the theatre, she'd just say, yeah, okay, that's good, and just let it happen. And so I had the luxury of being able to explore lots and lots of different avenues, and no matter what I did, air cadets, working with thespians in the theatre industry, I did so many different things. No matter what I tried, I always ended up coming back to music because I couldn't find anything where I could just be myself. And with music, I didn't have to turn myself on; it just happened naturally. So I suppose, if anything, coming from like Jamaica, which is a music, the music is ingrained. It's not even it's first nature. She probably understood the importance of that in terms of keeping people together, because they needed to keep the West Indian community together in the UK when they came over during Windrush. So they understood the importance of music in that sense. So she obviously realised that it was something that would be able to keep me sort of balanced and in a good place in a country where we weren't necessarily being accepted at that time. So it kept me close to home. So if I wanted to do a party at home, she allowed me to do it, to bring people back, whether it be to just sit down and play music on my Amstrad hi-fi, and or eventually later on, we used to use the sound system from, which was a 3K sound system from Fon Studios. We managed to get about 6 people to drag that rig up to the top floor of the flats and put that in our flat, and we probably had about 150 people turn up. In fact, the party started, I went down to Fargate and I met everybody on Fargate who was coming to the party, and I stood at the bottom and said, if you're coming to the party, follow me. And all the shops just emptied out. This is late at night, and there was a stream of people all the way down from Fitzallen Square up to Hyde Park Flats, people going, is it on this floor, is it on that floor? And anyway, this party went off, and it was off the scale. But the interesting thing about it was, in a working class community, it was acceptable to kind of make everything was okay, because we generated inclusivity as children, and I think that kind of carried forward for quite a long time, especially on the Hyde Park Flats, which was kind of left to rot to a degree. So we made our own entertainment. I'd made a bit of a name for myself anyway in Sheffield, so people knew what I did, and they allowed me to kind of, talking about it now, it allowed me to express myself like massively through all that whole period. So I'm really eternally grateful to my mum and the people that we lived around, because there was never any animosity or upset caused by the big parties what we did on there. I actually want to play something that was really pivotal in terms of like the change in terms of like what came back from Jamaica actually. So you can hear about the sonic representation of Sheffield in Jamaica, which kind of blew me and Rafe, my partner at Cabal, away when we went there and we hit the ground. It was like, oh my God, this is like Sheffield in Jamaica. And we came back and it completely changed the dynamic and the sound of the city at a time when we were, like I said, when trip hop was really, really big. And we brought this back, this heartbeat rhythm track, and it just set Sheffield on fire after that. That's what I call liquid rhythm track, and for me that was the sound that changed everything about how I DJ'd, and it actually, that particular sound called a heartbeat rhythm track, which we brought back from Jamaica, was the first time anybody in Sheffield had heard anything like that. That allowed me to try slowing down house music for the first time. So I start from hearing that, I'll pitch everything down to about -4, just so that I could start to fit ragga rhythm tracks into it like that. And it completely changed the sound of ragga. So if at -4, house and ragga start to fuse, and if you start to drop instrumentals like that together, they start to sound like house. Try it.
Once again, an extremely huge, massive thank you, Winston, Toddla T, DJ Q. And thank you